All right, welcome everyone to the Portland Utility Board meeting for February 6th. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and the public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda. And you can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. As a board, PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted towards people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. And this means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. And the way that we do that, we put our principles into action by speaking up and speaking out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we will focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct, not the person.
All right, my name is Amy Archer Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, who you're addressing or if you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by me, so please limit to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak and haven't been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. I may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can also raise your hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos can be turned on when speaking if desired. It's not required. And please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And if you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *6 to mute and unmute. Public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with me or raise your hand during that portion of the agenda. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. I will pass it back to you, Robin.
Thank you. And so, board members, we're going to begin with just a brief update regarding the recent natural resources work session. And we'll focus the majority of our meeting today actually on the budget, hearing from the bureaus that we represent about the plans for requested budgets, as well as a little bit of internal board discussion on our next steps. All right, time for disclosure of communications. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Not hearing any, or not seeing any hands raised. Looks like we can move along. All right, so this is a time for public comment. Amy, has anyone submitted public comment before the meeting?
No, I've not received anything in advance. So if you're in the room, please raise your hand or unmute and speak.
All right, not seeing any hand raises. We can move to the next topic. All right, so for this, Amy, I think we're still shy one person for quorum. Is that correct? Okay, so with this, we'll actually just put approving our draft minutes for the last two meetings on hold. Hopefully we'll be able to get quorum by the end of the meeting. All right, so just wanted to give some brief updates. We did have a work session that we attended on the first of the month where our board provided testimony, both by Bob and Rosalind. And so I just wanted to give either of them, if they're here, or possibly Amy, a moment to speak on that experience.
So unfortunately, I don't think I've seen Rosalind or Bob join us yet. So I had expected to hear from them. So it might be something we want to circle back around to at the end of the meeting, just so that we don't take a lot of time. Although if anybody's in the room and wants to share any comment based on what you saw, then certainly we can loop to that. Really, Bob and Rosalind did a great job providing very eloquent testimony on behalf of the pub and as individuals. And so just a lot of appreciation I got from some members outside of the meeting as well as, and I've passed that on to them as well. I did just want to flag that as you all figure out kind of what your next steps are, there's two kind of key elements as the next steps beyond the work session. That's that the work group is continuing to do their work. There was an inquiry that came from the directors to the pub members and the other advisory boards involved that I passed on to you, just asking for feedback from pub members on if there were any suggestions for the most effective way to engage you all in kind of the next steps. And so there was that opportunity for you to loop back with them. I haven't received anything directly. I figured that it was something that you all wanted to kind of wait and see how the work session went and kind of maybe give some advice after that. But whether it's a very brief discussion today or you all can think about it and send me some feedback just via email outside the meeting, that's fine as well. I will pass on to the Bureau folks any information that and suggestions that you have as individuals or collectively as a pub. Their timeline is relatively quick. The plan that they're putting forward to the CAO or Chief Administrative Officer, Mike Jordan, is due in April of this year. And so that means they're moving pretty quick through March, both internally and working with the advisory boards. So I know there were some frustrations with kind of the last coordinated effort. So as we want to think about if there's any future coordinated effort, you know, how to maybe kind of address some of those challenges on the front end to make sure that all of your needs are met. And making sure that we dedicate either some existing time on your March meetings or identify if you want a meeting outside of your standard meeting times for that next step of diving back into the work plan and providing feedback. So open the floor for you all. And again, just for a brief conversation, because we want to leave as much time as possible for budget. So some of this may just be getting you to think, and then we can connect one-on-one outside of the meeting or discuss it at the meeting on February 15th.
I see Karen has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Thanks, Robin. Karen Williams, voting member. I can just super quick throw an idea out there for folks' consideration. I was envisioning the joint meeting of the three boards. I was envisioning that quite differently than how it ended up turning out. And I am wondering if anyone would be interested in talking further about a joint meeting of the three boards to compile like joint comments on the work plan from all three boards, but have the meeting of the three boards be more of a working meeting, not like a presentation type meeting, which is what the past one was. Not, you know. So that's just one idea I had, and would be willing to do my best to attend such a, which would be an extra meeting.
Thank you for that, Karen. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, this is Heather, voting member. I think that that idea is great that Karen just brought up, and that's what I thought we were doing in the first round. So I think that that would be great. I think that there are some really passionate and talented people across the boards, and I would love to hear input from others.
This is Robin. I'd also like to say I like the idea behind this. It feels like it's pretty aligned with the greater service area request where we'll be working as a public works body or entity along with these other groups. And so I think better connection with them and perhaps more FaceTime would be warranted as well. So I like that idea. And before we move on, Amy, can I ask, was I'm not sure if you've done this, but you've done it previously where you have sent us the testimony that was recorded. Has that been forwarded along yet, or is it something that we should look up to see?
No, I will send you the links again so that it links directly to where the testimony starts and all of that. So you should receive
right.
that today. And
Beautiful.
I will then loop with you, Robin, as chair, maybe to connect with the chairs of the other boards as well. Particularly if it's a joint meeting where we're hoping to have multiple parties versus whether a couple of you wanted to volunteer or we're interested, if you say a working meeting in a smaller subset, that can be challenging to schedule with the short timeline that we have. So I just want to put out there, kind of acknowledge that it may be something that not everybody would be able to attend, but would continue to move that work forward. But maybe I can start by connecting with their staff and see if the chairs can connect and identify whether there's kind of communal interest in that. Alexis, go ahead.
Yeah, I really like the idea of a joint working session, whether that's full advisory boards or some designated individuals. And then I would love also to hear from the directors or the members who are working on the working group, just like an update on how they're doing on a regular basis, whether that's in writing, like coming out of the work session, like kind of the report out from the work session, if that's something that can be shared and what next steps are. And I do think having an update in March would be really helpful, but I'm wondering if they can kind of just keep us apprised of progress and decisions, key questions that they're still grappling with, et cetera, as they go, to help bring us along on the development of this, realizing that it is moving pretty fast. So that might be a more efficient to keep us going rather than one opportunity to provide feedback.
Yes, that sounds good. I know that the staff, they certainly have made themselves available and had indicated that they could even come to the February meetings, even when the March was kind of the next time on paper. But there certainly has been interest from their staff in making sure that you all are up to date. So I will provide that feedback back to them today as well.
Go ahead, Chris.
What I would like is, like there's definitions and stuff like that. Like an update on the things, like what is natural areas? There was several questions that they couldn't give us answers to because they didn't have definitions yet. If they could tell us every month, like we've come up with a definition of this and come up with a definition of that. This is what, something like that, because that seems to be a real sticking point for us to really figure out what we should be doing if we don't know what it's covering. If that kind of makes sense.
All right, you're on mute, Robin. I'm assuming you're ready to move on.
Yes,
That
I
was
was
maybe
thinking
what was going on. Mute.
Yes, I was on mute. I wanted to thank Chris for always getting to the nitty gritty of it. Like, is this legal? What are the definitions? Really pressing them because that's what we need out of board members. So thank you so much for always leading with that. With that, we have about an hour to discuss many budgetary things. And so I thought it would be a good time to just address the fact that we're going to have a presentation today, I believe, by both the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Portland Water Bureau about the like just preparation for that February, or actually, sorry, preparation for the upcoming February 8th work session. And the goal of today's conversation is just really understanding the challenges that they're facing, plans for requested budgets, and how these plans and budgetary ideas are aligning or not aligning with PUB's values. So please help me welcome BES and Water Bureau staff for information regarding their requested budgets. Amy, is BES going first?
I'm going to leave it to Farshad and Cecilia or whoever else is presenting to kind of take the floor and see where we need to go, because I don't know exactly how they're doing their joint presentation. So I will, looks like Farshad has unmuted, so let's start there.
Hey, everybody. And hey, Cecilia. Cecilia and I have not coordinated on this. So I am just going to go for it. Cecilia, apologies. If you don't mind, I'll just go first. And because I think that's showing up first on the agenda. Hello, everybody. I'm Farshad Aladati. I'm the Business Services Group Manager from BES. And I wanted to share my appreciation, as always, for your ongoing interest on not only the financial implications that are naturally part of the budget, but the policy implications and what it all means, and how it relates to core values of PUB. I don't think it's ever possible to bottom that out definitely in a short period of time, but I'm hoping that the handful of slides that I'm going to walk through from BES's perspective kind of give you a sense of what we've had to balance over the last several months in crafting this year's budget. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can manage that. I'm working on a laptop with one screen today, so it may be a little clunky for me.
Farshad, I can share if you.
Oh, would you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me see if I can figure it out, but yes.
Yeah, awesome. Of course, the mysterious voice from the ether is Ken Bartacci. He is our financial planning manager. And I will invite him to correct any misstatements that I make or add any color to the details that I'm sharing. Awesome. Hopefully you all can see it. I can see it. So if we can go, before we go to the next slide, I just want to maybe give some overarching comments about the way BES is viewing this year's budget. Essentially, this year's budget is a current service level budget. It's essentially that. It's not so simple to say current service level. There's been a lot of new expenses that all bureaus, including the two utilities, have had to manage given the inflationary pressures and the new expenses from the new form of government. And we're doing our best to absorb those and rebalance our expenditures so that we are not increasing rates and keeping things affordable, but trying to deliver the core services for our community members. So the next slide, Ken, if you could. These cost pressures for BES's perspective are really being driven in some pretty understandable categories. We have ongoing safety and security needs for our bureau assets and our bureau employees. A lot of those have to do with aging infrastructure. A lot of them have to do with kind of the general environment in our community. Inflation is, I think we've been speaking a lot about inflation over the last year and a half or so, impacting both the cost of the day-to-day operations, but also the cost of borrowing and the cost of delivering capital projects. We have significant long-term asset investment needs within BES. A lot of our infrastructure is aging. That is causing some real risk to both the levels of service we provide to our community, compliance risk to our permits, and it's also increasing the cost of operations. If we have assets that are aging, they need more care, and that care has an impact on our staff that deliver that maintenance and operation service. We are, as you know, last year we did not receive the full requested rate increase from council, and as a consequence, we had to make $5 million in reductions from this current year's budget. That's caused us to defer projects and reprioritize work, and we're still grappling with the implications of that loss of revenue. There's a lot of changes in government organization in the city of Portland, and one of the major changes is the consolidation of all of the Bureau's permitting activities into a single permitting authority. Those consolidations do have costs for the Bureau that we're managing within our budget. I mentioned asset failure. When we have failed assets, it causes us to have emergency repairs. Emergency repairs are far more costly than planned investments and planned maintenance. It also impacts the confidence that the community has in our ability to deliver services. So we're trying hard to make sure that we're kind of approaching a risk-based methodology of prioritizing our investments and making sure that the high consequence of failure projects are addressed first. But the volume of investments needed are not making that balance, that risk-based balancing, easy. We're anticipating large cost uncertainty. We have a number of projects that are underway that we're preparing for, but we don't know exactly what the final costs are going to be. So it makes financial planning challenging. Tryon Creek Treatment Plant is a project underway that many of you are very familiar with. As we enter into the second phase of this project and seek an outfit to construct and operate that plant, the final costs are still to be determined. We have ongoing environmental remediation expenses that we're anticipating in the coming years, and it's responsible for us to start to build resources to meet those obligations into the future. The new urban flood safety water quality district that's replacing the 3 drainage districts requires additional funding from the city and from the Bureau, and we are still working on determining what those final costs are going to be. I've mentioned a couple times the cost of city transition. All of those bills haven't come in yet, so we're trying to build a budget with still some level of uncertainty, including interagency costs, the costs that we pay each other, our sister bureaus, for internal services. And it's always true that the cost of regulation only increases. New requirements by regulators often result in increased investment in capital or increased operating expenses. So these are kind of a sense, hopefully you're getting a sense of the kind of the universe of cost pressures that the Bureau of Environmental Services is facing. That is not to say that we don't have a pretty sizable amount of resources to draw from, but I think this chart hopefully will help to dispel a misunderstanding about how we can absorb these new costs. It is true that last year's budget was $727 million, but this chart hopefully shows where we have the flexibility to make kind of discretionary spending decisions. Our capital improvement program last year was budgeted at $311 million. That is in an annual window of time, that's a pretty fixed amount of expenditure. The debt service on the financing we pay for those capital investments is a fixed amount that we really don't have any flexibility to change. Our contributions to the utility licensing fee of $19.6 million last year is not flexible. And the charges that the bureaus charge each other, 72.8 million, are not flexible either. So really what that leaves in terms of discretionary spending within that larger 727 million is about $158 million of personal services, that's salaries and benefits, and then external materials and services. This for us typically comes in the form of contracted staff augmentation or consultant support and some materials cost. We can turn some dials in these two areas, but it is far short of the full budgeted amount. So any kind of budget reductions, we want the pub to understand are really focused in this compressed part of our budget. Next slide. We've been talking a lot about PSEF, and I think it is helpful to understand that BES received, we believe BES will receive about $15.5 million per year to fund three important parts of our portfolio of responsibilities related to watershed management, watershed operations, stormwater management, and the management of trees on private property. This has been very helpful in helping the Bureau address its budget gaps as we understood them. And it is not a long-term solution, though. I just want to be clear. PSEF funding is a 5-year obligation, and the funding for these services after that 5 years does present some risk to our long-term financial plans. Next slide. So there's been a lot of change in how we understood what our financial situation is and what the potential budget shortfalls would be. Back maybe 6-9 months ago, we were anticipating a need to bridge a shortfall of up north of $20 million. That is a very significant, if you think back just to those orange slices of our budget, that's a very significant amount of revenue shortfall that we would have to account for. Part of that was bridged by the fall bump reductions we made last year when we did not receive our full 5.15 rate request. We took budget reductions of $5 million in last year's budget, which brought that gap down to $17.5 million. The $15.5 million I just spoke to reduced our budget shortfall even further to $2 million. And we feel we have a set of solid decisions that can be made that will bridge that final $2 million and bring our budget into balance. We've made some risk-based decisions to defer expenditures that weren't critical for next year into years 2 and 3 and further out. We've also looked at our current vacancies and requests that were made for new positions. We made some trade-off decisions to actually use current vacancies and reclassify those positions to meet future needs that were going to be appearing in our budget, but we're actually going to be using current budget to pay for those positions. This saved us about a little over $1 million of this $2 million shortfall. We're also looking at making reductions in materials and services, and potentially, we're just using this as an equivalency. Some further reductions need to be made that equate to about 3 to 5 positions. Not saying that we will be reducing positions. We're just giving you a sense of scale of what work remains to be done in our budget for this year before we submit it next week. So our reduction priorities are to first look towards reducing our external materials and services before staffing. Every staff person on our team is critical. They're all providing important services to our community. And it's very disruptive to the levels of service and to the BES family, obviously, to reduce positions. So we would be looking to external materials and services first. And then if we had to reduce positions, we'd be looking to reduce vacancies before filled positions. We have a kind of a prime directive to minimize the impacts on our customers, both in terms of service levels and the environment that they enjoy. I'm kind of breezing through this, Ken. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add up to this point.
No, I think you're really hitting it on the head. I think one of the pieces on the oh, it's not working. Hold on a sec. On this slide is that risk-based deferral of operating needs. While we're doing all this and not included in these numbers is an element of we're analyzing the work we're doing. We've identified the needs. We can't fund all those needs, so we're trying to compress those down to the most critical components. So that's outside of these numbers, but just know that that's happening.
I appreciate that that addition, Ken. I think I'll just add a little bit more to that too. By continuing to defer what may not be pressing priorities today, we're creating pressing priorities tomorrow. Those risk-based deferrals are just accumulating in future years and will have to be accounted for. Yeah, Alexis.
Hi, Farshad. Thanks for the presentation. And you just said what I was going to say,
Okay.
which was asking about that. So sorry to interrupt, but I was going to ask, are we just kicking the can down the road?
Yeah, unfortunately, everything that we're paying for, we feel is important. It's strategically aligned, and it addresses either risks or expected levels of service. And if we're deferring those, then we're just creating kind of larger liabilities into the future. So the bottom line for us is this. We are, again, going to ask for a rate increase of 5.15%. We believe this is a responsible and financially prudent level of increase that allows us to slowly build the resources we need to meet those significant future obligations so that we don't have large swings in rate increases when we need to finally, when the bill comes due for some of these larger obligations. We're building the resources so that the annual impacts to our customers is minimized. If there are additional charter-related costs that we are not aware of, that could impact our reliability of service. So let me just start over. We think that we can continue to deliver reliable services, even with this very challenging budget situation. But the assumptions are that we will receive 5.15%, that charter transition costs are going to remain pretty stable at this point, and we won't have any unexpected surprises. That general fund and interagency agreements are going to be near or at their current levels. That other rates and charges, including SDCs, we're going to cap their increases at 5%. And this is an area that is also, I think it's important to call out. We are not, BES charges a number of SDCs and other fees and charges as part of permitting work. And we do not fully recover the cost of providing those services. We would like to become a full cost recovery, have a full cost recovery model. We're not there yet. We are accepting that this year it may be difficult for us to increase those SDCs by larger than 5%. And we feel like we can still deliver the same level of service even by capping SDCs at 5%, but we are we're not closing the gap on full cost recovery. And then we are needing to focus our CIP investments on reliability, core services of our system. This is really important, and it's causing us to shift and rebalance and restack. You'll hear the word sometimes restack our CIP to reprioritize the projects that are really either risk-based or more aligned to core services. Sometimes there is a need to make capital investments in areas that are not highly aligned to core services. And what that does is it just increases risk because we're not able to put resources against those critical investments. So our hope is that we're pretty well balanced right now, but if there's pressure to bring in non-core projects into our CIP, that could be disruptive. So again, bottom line, we feel that we can reliably deliver service to our community, but certain assumptions do have to hold. And if those assumptions don't, then the thing that we'll have to give, unfortunately, will be the level of service to our community. And I hopefully didn't speak too fast, but I think that brings me to the end. I'm happy to answer any questions now or after Cecilia speaks to water.
Let's
Great.
give us a second to marinate. I would like to ask Ken possibly to pull up the slide that breaks down what BES believes they can adjust versus what they think is kind of holding steady. I think that might help some people. And it looks like Karen has their hand raised. So go ahead, Karen.
Thanks, Karen Williams, pub member. I have a couple questions, but maybe I'll just go with one for now. The cost pressure, Farshad, that you mentioned on your very first slide, the one about needing to consolidate into a single permitting authority.
Yes.
What can you help me understand what that, like where those costs are coming from? You know, I'm thinking like you need to change computer software or computer systems or something like that. Is it along the, where are the cost increases coming from with
Well,
that?
I'll take a stab at it. I'll invite Ken to contribute some more detail too. I think we have staff right now that does some of this work, and they also do other work for within the Bureau. If those staff move to a central organization, we would have to cover those costs of losing that staff to do the other non-permitting work. I mentioned this is more of a revenue side issue, but I did mention the ability to charge higher SDCs to start moving towards full cost recovery. If as a matter of policy, if we're prevented from increasing our fees and SDC charges, then we're having to subsidize the cost of providing those services out of the ratepayer pool of funds. So it's a complex situation. I'm probably not fully answering the question, but I think those are the major issues that led to this bullet.
Yeah, totally agree.
How's the marinating? Well, I'm sure more questions will come up during or after Cecilia's presentation for water. I'll be on deck if anything comes up for BES. Oh, Chris, go ahead.
Yep, let's get Chris before we check.
Okay, with this budget, are we addressing the backlog? Are we building it down? Is it building up, staying even with our maintenance backlog? If you could address that, that would be helpful.
I'm going to probably say something that is going to make people uncomfortable. It's not addressing it. We are focusing on just core service. A lot of the costs associated that I mentioned in this slide are making our ability to work down the backlog very challenging. And because of CIP priorities being what they are, maintenance issues can often be alleviated by making capital investments. So replacing old equipment with new equipment makes the maintenance burden less. So it's a combination of less operating dollars available to do maintenance is making the maintenance backlog worse, and not being able to deliver as much critical capital investment as we would like is making that backlog worse, and the overall making it difficult to address the overall conditions of our assets that we have in our portfolio. So this is not an ideal situation. I think what we're saying is it's We feel we can deliver core services to the community, but it's not a sustainable financial footing that we're on right now. It's kind of a wobbly rock in the middle of the river, but we would like to get to the bigger rock and be on more stable ground soon, if that makes sense.
All right, thank you for that, Farshad. Any remaining questions we will pass along to Amy, and let's go ahead and hand the floor over to Cecilia from the Portland Water Bureau. Go ahead, Cecilia.
Thank you. I'm Cecilia Hoon, Finance Director for the Portland Water Bureau, and I will work on sharing my screen. So I think this is up on your screen. Here we go. All right. So while Farshad and I did not have a chance to connect before this meeting, and if we did, we probably would have had a slightly more coordinated presentation. But our presentation will look similar, just a slightly different story, I think, but very much along the same lines. I'll try not to repeat a lot of what I think are some similarities between the two bureaus, but probably maybe even adding to some of Farshad's comments. I do want to start out with saying that, one of the things that is very different about this year's budget process than prior years is the directive that we have gotten from the mayor, right? We need to be coming in at our water rate increase at 7.9%. And I want to mention that that is lower than what we were forecasting for the fiscal year 24-25. And we're also directed to absorb all city transition costs. And where it's different about that is that we are not given a dollar amount to absorb. So we're having to, quite honestly, been planning very conservatively in the last 3-4 months in anticipation of knowing that we will need to absorb city transition cost, including initiatives like the single permitting authority. We don't know what's the financial impact potentially of that change. So we have what I consider to be strategies that we have put in place, doing very conservative planning on what we need to do to absorb that cost, as well as looking at a lower rate increase for water than what we have forecasted. So I want to preface that with sort of the uncertainty that we have been operating under as far as developing our budget, and will continue to do so until the mayor's proposed, because that's when all of the decisions will be made. This graph looks very similar to BES's. We have the same, essentially the cost buckets that we're talking about. We have a large capital project program that includes the filtration project that we're doing. And we have debt service for prior investments. So those two are definitely areas where we cannot influence rates on. We can shrink the capital program, but that's a long-term rate implication, not a next year thing. And then on the operating side, again, interagencies, general fund overhead, those are, not completely out of our control, but very limited, very, very limited. And then utility license fee based on the water sales that we do on an annual basis, which then drops us down to essentially two buckets: personnel services and external material services. And those total to be about $110 million for the Water Bureau. Still feels like a lot of dollars for what may be available for us to be cutting back or trimming. But I think the other thing that I want to stress is that we are a highly regulated utilities, both water, and sewer. We are very limited in what we can actually trim back. We have to be monitoring. We have to be doing all the sampling. We have to be treating the water to make sure that's safe and safe to drink, and meeting all of the regulatory requirements related to providing clean water. So again, very limited even within those two buckets, because materials, if we don't have the materials to put the pipes in the ground, then we don't have, we don't have to work for the people, right? So part of the materials is to support the people to do the work that we need them to be doing. So while it feels like 110 million is a lot of money, it's still very limited in how we can be reducing. There will be impacts. So I do want to kind of, refresh perhaps what we have been doing in the Bureau. In the last few years, we've been in this sort of not necessarily cut all the time, but definitely financial constraints, right? So we've been looking at every opportunities to repurpose our positions where we can. So every vacant positions comes up, we're asking ourselves the question of, can we repurpose this position? Do we have to backfill it? What's the work that's being done? Again, where we can, we're repurposing, so we're not adding new positions. We're always looking for opportunities to deliver a program differently at lower cost, but still achieving that goal that we have set for ourselves for those programs. And then, of course, always continuously looking for ways to be more efficient and effective. So I want to sort of remind, the pub that this is what we do all the time, and we have continued to do this. So before I get into sort of our financial situation, we did also get Portland Clean Energy Investment Fund. We got some in water. We got $4.5 million of dollars to work on a list of energy efficiencies and renewable energy projects. And these are projects that some of them are on our capital plan to be doing over the next few years. And others are, bringing it up to the front line of or front of the line to do. We did get what is considered to be ongoing dollars for the next 5 years to do water leak repair, $500,000, but that's on top of what we are already doing. So none of these dollars are going to help us with our current financial situation as far as needing to absorb the transition cost and staying within the rate increase that we have been directed. Hydropower also got some funding for them as well. So what does this mean for us as far as the budget? Again, we have been working very conservatively for the last few months. And, as we do our financial planning, a lot of the assumptions that go into our forecast are refined over time. Some of them are COLA, cost of living. Some of them are inflation interagencies, our information that we didn't get until early January. So again, this is work that we have been thinking about and sort of quantifying what is the potential for what we need to be doing as far as reductions. So what we needed to do was to reduce our budget by $2 million. That's just because of the lower rate increase that we got. And Farshad mentioned that for BES as well. It's $2 million for us. I believe BES was $5 million. Our rate forecast calls for an 8.1% rate increase for fiscal year 24-25. That basically means it's based on the assumptions that we have in place for inflation. It's based on what we expect and planned out. And so anything other than our forecast means that we are going to be looking at a reduction in our budget. So a 7.9 would mean that we have to cut our operating budget by $500,000 to be able to come in at that rate. What we also experience is costs that are above inflation. PGE rates, so for pumping some of our pump stations, energy use. When we run groundwater, we have energy use. PGE rates went up 17%, which is a lot more than inflation. So that's a cost that is above what we were planning for. Chemical continues to rise. We saw that through the pandemic, and it has not slowed down a whole lot for us. So anything that what we consider to be above what we were planning totals to $1.2 million, which means that we need to find somewhere else to absorb that, just to stay within the forecast. Transition costs, we got a range. And again, that's going to be based on council decision on how much will be approved as increased cost to put in the new city organization and charter transition. Our estimate based on the allocation that we may be expecting is $650,000 to $820,000. Again, a range that we're working within. What we call decision packages, we're hearing some of the support bureaus may be putting in staffing needs because there's a bigger council to support, which there's a cost potentially allocated to us. And again, the single permitting authority is another one of those where the transition, the city transition stuff that's happening overall could have a financial impact to us, and that is still unknown to us. So adding all of these up, we're looking at $4 to $5 million, again assuming everything else being the same. And that's sort of what we've been operating without having, a clear direction on, or information on exactly how much transition costs we have to be absorbing and what potential other city support costs might be approved through council, as well as others, sort of city initiatives that's happening, like the single permitting authority. So very similar to BES, we also have the same reduction priorities, reducing external material services before staffing. And while that appears like a simple thing for us to be doing, I do want to point out that, that does mean less of the materials or the services that we need to support the staff that needs to get the work done. It also means less flexibility in our budget to be doing, the Camp Creek fire. We're responding to that. We're having to spend dollars related to responding to that. Our budget is much less flexible to help cover for unforeseen event, including, the snow and storm events, right? We just had one where our staff was out there helping our customers turn off their water when their pipes were bursting, when, things were starting to thaw out. So, as we shrink our budget, it also shrinks our flexibility to be responding as events of those type occurs for us. We, of course, will be looking at eliminating vacant positions before filled positions. And of course, that basically limits what we could be, reducing and the impacts to our programs. And then, of course, again, minimizing direct impacts to our customer is our overall goal as far as the priorities, the reductions that we may need to be making. I also want to acknowledge that PUB in your value letter for the budget also provided us some trade-offs or decision-making. We are looking at increasing equity and affordability to our lower income customers. That's with our smart discount program that Krisha has come and talked about. We are, trying to keep equity initiatives a top priority within the constraints of what we are working within. We certainly want to be doing, preventive maintenance and not be deferring our maintenance. That's not good for our system. And then, of course, as labor contract negotiations happen, that, we are honoring those. So I do want to acknowledge that we did, look at what was provided to us from PUB and be thinking about these directives or guidance that we got from PUB as we are looking at the decisions and trade-offs that we will need to be making as far as the reductions that we need to be doing. So up to 5 million is what we're looking at. And what we are going to be needing to do is probably reducing our external material and services to some degree. We are looking to reduce our footprint with some of our staff working fully remote. And then we may potentially need to be eliminating vacant positions. And I do want to point out that we got very strong support last year on the 8 new trainee positions that we got. And those were our goals to help better diversify our workforce, or at least even increasing our ability to do so. And those are among the 15 to 18 that we may need to be eliminating. Again, depending on exactly how much we will be directed to absorb city cost. And then some of the other positions are support positions. And what that basically means is that, we'll just be able to do less, because instead of having support staff to help us to do some of our work, we're having to do it ourselves, which means our own efficiencies is reduced as far as the amount of work that we can be putting out. Some of the positions that we have in the bucket that we're considering also includes what we consider to be impacts to the future. So we have a very strong asset management group. We have a position there from asset management that does not have an immediate impact to our operation, but certainly in the long term, it would have impact on how we want to be, continuing with using asset management to help us prioritize the work that we need to be doing. So again, while not an immediate impact, and we can manage a lot of these, we have very reduced flexibility. Our initiatives to further diversify our workforce with a trainee position, it's going to be put on, not completely on hold. We still have trainee positions, but again, increasing that effort is what we were hoping to be able to do with the new positions. Will be paused to some degree, and then we hope to, of course, resume. In our mind, no positions that we have is really zero impact to us. They exist for a purpose. And what it means is that, work will be delayed. We hope to restore a lot of these positions in the future when we can afford to do so. So again, a bucket of reduction items that we have that we are prepared to take, depending on the amount of city transition costs that we will be told to absorb when we get that final information in the mayor's proposed. Additional PSEF funding, what we're hoping to do is to submit for, to request for more funding there. There is we have a water efficiency program that we feel would qualify for the criteria for PSEF funding. That is worth $1.1 million. If we get that, our reductions could be reduced. We are exploring what we call fee recovery for folks using their credit card pay online. There's a bank fee, a credit card fee that's charged to us, and that is included in our rates for everybody to help support for that expense. We're considering charging that. It's likely that we won't have this in place by July. We are looking at putting together what I think it's, parameters or thresholds on how much of a dollar of your bill can be paid with credit cards. So large commercial accounts where their bills are like $90,000, we're going to say you can't pay with your credit card. So there's going to be a limit potentially is what we're working toward to at least reduce the cost of this item for us. And we're exploring fee recovery with those that, want to use the service to be paying for it. General fund support is something that we would like to seek to maintain the decorative fountains. That's $900,000 that we're paying on. General fund is probably strapped with funding. We don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon as far as getting that support. But if we do get all of that, again, with each one of these options, we would be looking at reducing the shortfall that we have to actually come up with. And then I just kind of want to wrap with, looks very similar to Farshad, BES's, again, what Farshad sort of outlined. For the most part, if we get our 7.9% rate increase on our retail rates, and, again, if the transition cost is within the limits that we're talking about, I think it's all manageable. There could be stuff out there that we just don't know about that, could be outside of what we're even planning. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions, or maybe Farshad's happy to take more questions. Karen, please.
Thank you, Cecilia. Karen Williams, pub member. Question for both you, Cecilia, and Farshad about using the PSEF funding. I heard you, Farshad, say reliance on this could pose some risks. I'm paraphrasing it, but I think I heard something like that. And Cecilia, I heard you say that we're maybe looking to ask for more PSEF funding in the to prevent further reductions. So could each of you say a little bit more about I don't know, maybe the reliability of PSEF funding? I mean, can we rely on it? If we do rely on it, what risks are we assuming with that?
So I can try, unless Farshad, you have more about PSEF.
I can share the BES perspective, but do you want to take a first swing at it, Cecilia? I can wait.
Sure. I mean, my understanding is that there is a process for PSEF allocation, and we're still in that process. And council will be voting on any of those allocations. So that has not happened, and I think that's maybe potentially where the risk is. There is a committee that reviews the proposal of the funding that has been shared. But the committee still is reviewing that proposal, which is what we're hoping will, get their approval. And then of course, council still needs to adopt. I think that's probably where that sort of uncertainty may be, is until it's adopted, it's not in the bank. And then what we're hoping to, and we understand that potentially there might be more PSEF funding out there, so that we're hoping to put, our sort of ask in that basket and see if we get more, for the water efficiency program.
Yeah, and from the BES perspective, I think the uncertainty is absolutely correct. It's and I think we share that concern that Cecilia just mentioned. I'll also say, I think in our particular circumstance, the 3 programs that we applied for, we were seriously considering reducing or sunsetting the services that those teams provided. The PSEF monies kind of perpetuated that work for some time, which is it's great for our community. But in receiving the PSEF monies, the rate-based budget that was paying for that is going to be spent in other places. And if the expectation is those programs continue beyond the 5 years that they have PSEF funding, then that's where the liability is created for us. We won't be saving for future budget expenditures in these areas. We're not planning on that, at least at this point. So if those teams are to continue and PSEF is not available after year 5, then that creates a financial risk for us.
Go ahead, Chris.
My question is for Cecilia. You mentioned we know about the deferred maintenance issue in BES law. I'm more aware of it. How is it looking in water? Are we talking millions, tens of millions? What kind of numbers are we talking about with the deferred maintenance in water?
We don't talk about our maintenance, sort of in a deferred way. I mean, we have asset management that tells us, areas where we have maybe poor asset conditions that we are, looking at. We're also doing some risk-based analysis around those assets. And in some cases, those are intentional, right? You run them to failure to some degree. So we have been doing really well with maintaining our assets, our core assets, as I like to think about it. And so I don't think we have maybe the extent of the deferred maintenance that I think BES may have.
So you guys don't necessarily have, like we used to have, and I don't know if we still have it, a chart that showed life expectancy failure. And all we were doing at a time, and I don't know if we're still doing it, we were hitting the stuff that were over life expectancy and we know it failed. We were what was called the red and red. So we weren't hitting that. Does water have such a thing? And are you guys just not hitting the red and red? You're hitting the more the yellow, you're moving things more into the yellow category of it might fail, and it hasn't hit the life expectancy point. Does that kind of make sense what I'm asking, Celia?
Yeah, I see Jeff Winter, our capital planning manager, on the line, and I'm gonna just call what he called my lifeline here, maybe to help with that
Phone a friend.
question. Phone a friend, that's right. Jeff, if you don't mind helping with that question.
Sure. I think everybody can hear me. Let's see
Yes.
Let's see if I can. Oh, even got video. Oh, and the old screensaver. That's still a holiday season somewhere. So, hey, Chris. Yeah, I would say our short-term maintenance needs are being met, right? We generally are able to get our core assets replaced, primarily the distribution mains. We got over 2,200 miles of those, and that's the big driver. Over time, the forecast is the failures will increase. And although we do a 5-year CIP every year, so it's hard to see any change there. But over the long haul, we do have increasing amounts of investment in that program area. Now, we have looked at deferring some things as a result of all the factors that Cecilia and Farshad mentioned. But for now, it seems fairly reasonable. And we've had pretty good history recently. We haven't seen like the forecast increase in the number of breaks per mile. That's kind of the uniform way we look at things. So things are fairly stable. So in the short term, I think we're pretty good. But obviously, we have the potential that things could start going the other direction, and then that would present a bit of a problem. But I would say we can manage things now with the resources we have.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you for being that friend and answering the phone.
You're welcome, Cecilia.
I see Karen's hand raised. Go ahead, Karen.
You know, I do, but I've had a lot of floor time here, so I mean, I do have more questions, so nobody leave, but I do want to step back and let some other folks ask some questions.
Well, we have about 5 minutes remaining allotted to our conversation regarding the updates. So with no other people specifically raising their hand, I'm actually just gonna let you have the floor, Karen.
Thank you. Cecilia, thanks for calling out the 5 or 6 trade-offs that we had put in our letter last fall. This might not entirely be a fair question because I'm kind of asking for you to maybe go into the weeds that you might not have access to. But do any, could you call out a couple of programs that you have proposed funding for or initiatives that would anyway, that we could explicitly support should we choose to do that sort of fall into some of those trade-off categories? I mean, one that comes to mind is increased labor costs and supporting cost of living increases that, paying staff a fair wage that they've negotiated. That was one of the trade-offs that we mentioned, right? That's worth to us, that's important, and that would be worth having a rate increase for. So any other examples that come to mind?
I would say we definitely prioritized our financial assistance program. Those were not even, something that we would consider, cutting back on. We also prioritized the staffing for sort of the, what is that? What's the term that we call it? Where we're helping our customers with payment arrangements and all of those. So we do have, a customer service staff that we're supporting, adding limited term positions in those areas to help with sort of the debt recovery effort for us. So we were prioritizing those areas to not be considered for reductions. And that includes, the vacancies. Again, we're limited with, again, we put this limit on ourselves, right? We don't want layoffs. So we're looking at only vacant positions. So that's limited. So we start parsing out, okay, any positions that supports, debt recovery, any positions that supports financial system, we're putting those aside. But, once we get down, through some of those, what's left is even more limited in where we can be pulling if we have to do those position reductions. And that's why I want to be clear that the position reductions that we are looking at it does include the 8 new positions that were just added to help with, sort of the diversity goal that we have on our workforce. And we felt that, again, weighing out all of the other things that we have to be considering. We do have training positions, so it's not like we're cutting out the program completely. We're just not able to increase that effort as much as, what we have planned with them. Does that kind of get at what you're looking for, Karen?
Yeah, absolutely. So that actually answered another question I had. So let me just confirm. So those 8 positions from last budget year, those did get filled?
They're not. We, it takes effort to fill the position, so we have not. And of course, we recognize immediately that we have to be reducing $2 million just to meet the lower rate that we got. That we immediately put all vacant positions on hold for review. And we were, again, having sort of a lot of those internal conversations. Can we release these positions to fill? Let's hold off on them because the other positions that are vacant, weighing out sort of the priority, understanding the needs of those positions. Some we say move forward to fill because there's a bigger operational impact to not filling them versus the trainee position, for example. So we were not able to fill them yet.
Okay, thank you.
Alexis?
Yeah, that just, thanks for your question, Karen, because, oh, sorry, this is Alexis Rife, voting member. That triggered for me a question around it looks like many of the cuts are in the material services. And if I'm recalling correctly, in the past, when we've talked about those, we've talked about having those external contracts with BIPOC organizations and companies. And so that has helped to meet some of the JEDI and diversity goals of the bureaus. And so I'm just curious, I don't know if it's a question so much as a comment into what I understand, obviously, the difficult situation that you're in and with these budget constraints, but also just kind of thinking about some of the constraints that has also put on the Bureau's ability to meet your diversity and equity goals in terms of your contracting also with external support organizations. And so I guess my question is, am I remembering this correctly? Is that part of the equation when it comes to equity and diversity goals for the bureaus? And then perhaps then a question to pose to my pub members is if that is worth flagging in any sort of communication to council.
If I think what I'm hearing is, were our cuts, did our cuts impact maybe contracting with minorities? And
correct.
Yeah, and I want to say, just kind of thinking through the dollars that we're looking at. I want to say we did not. We were very thoughtful in that exercise. We did it actually over the summer. Again, recognizing that we have to come up with $2 million. It's like we didn't stop doing budget. Let's just say in the last year, as soon as we wrapped up, we started thinking about how we're going to, be managing that. So we put positions on hold. We went through a whole exercise of looking at a lot of our material services dollars. I don't want to say it's trimming around the edges, but really looking at where can we reduce that has the least impact on the programs. I don't think we took a whole lot of dollars out of professional services, although there probably were some, but I don't recall programmatically where we were like cutting out, we can't do this anymore type of thing, conversation.
All right, so with that, I think that we'll actually commence the conversation, at least today, for any budget updates. Thank you, Cecilia and Farshad, as well as Ken and whoever the phone a friend was. Thank you all. And yeah, I think we're just going to take this the next couple of minutes maybe to reflect on where the pub would like to, how we would like to address the information that we've gathered and reflect on the mayor's budget memos. So with that, Amy, did you want to speak at all, or is it just kind of a chat amongst ourselves?
Yeah, let me just pull up on screen, get back to just the reminder of kind of timeline. Of course, the challenge that everybody is facing is that the process is moving pretty quickly And that includes then, you know, a lot of upcoming dates, some this week, some next week, where you're having to respond to this kind of hypothetical information, and opportunities for input to council, you know, is kind of in this short window of the next month while you're also trying to absorb information. So that is particularly challenging, I think, this year. So I've highlighted on the right side of the screen there just a reminder of the most immediate dates that are coming up. So there's the Public Works budget session this Thursday on the 8th. The February 15th, next Thursday, you have a pub meeting. The following day is when the requested budget is available to the public. So it's published, you know, just prior to that and posted for the public. So that's the date that those are due. That's when the big documents that usually you have, you know, more time to kind of delve into to understand a little bit deeper before giving feedback. And then March 5th is when the rate hearing is, and that is when PUB's next meeting is. So you know, one clear deliverable that you have is a letter in the requested budget that there's opportunity for advisory committees to include a report or letter of some sort as part of the requested budget. So again, there's the existing November values letter and then whatever other content you may want to highlight. But that's between now and next week that needs to be finalized. So any other priorities you want to highlight in that, in your response to what you heard today, and or the mayor's guidance, now would be the time to start, you know, kind of hashing through some of that. We don't have a lot of time left in the meeting today, so I don't know whether people are feeling like they could give a little bit more time to discuss some of the response to that, or whether you want to do that outside the meeting or schedule an additional meeting. Because again, if you want to provide something in that requested budget letter, then the time is short for that. You also could, as you have with council previously, provide a more detailed letter that you could discuss more in depth at the February 15th meeting and further hone kind of what your feedback is based on what you hear at the Public Works budget work session. And have something that you provide to council by the end of the month, so that it is available for consideration as part of the rate hearing and before some of those decisions are being made. So that's kind of where you're at as far as timeline. And certainly for those of you who have been through it before, would love to hear feedback and items like what you were raising during the meeting. Some of the questions you had, I think, kind of implied some areas of feedback that you may want to cover in an upcoming communication with council.
And Amy, before we start, I was going to ask, would this be a good time just to do a straw poll to see if pub members had maybe an extra 5 or 10 minutes to offer at the end of the meeting, just so that we can have a little bit of time to actually discuss this? I'm not sure if that's an official vote or just like a give a thumbs up if you think that you have 5 or 10 extra minutes to offer.
Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up from Heather and Karen, Alexis, Chris, Julia. All right, so, and Robin. So straw poll tells me people want to discuss it. So I say open the floor and see what feedback comes up.
Beautiful. This is Robin, pub member and chair. I'll jump in. I reread our November values letter. I think I actually really like it. And personally, I'm not sure what we can add to it. But I was trying to figure out if it's too late to critique the framing of the mayor's 2 budget letters, where, personal opinion, I think that some of the framing is inconsistent with the needs of the community, and not necessarily aligning, having pub's values not necessarily aligning with the mayor's, and it being important, if it's a shared view, to see that some of the framing of those budget memos is actually limiting to the progress that we're attempting to make as a community. Go ahead, Karen.
Karen Williams, pub member. Yes, I would like to see us do that. And particularly what stood out to me in the mayor's guidance was, or directive, or both, yes, it's the mayor, was, it's stated as fact, that, essentially stated as fact that, high taxation is leading to migration out of Portland. And then that sort of frames the rest of the directive about how we need to limit rate increases and so on and so forth. And I did think that was problematic, because I think, certainly if that is, well, let's see, we can't, if that is the directive that's coming from the mayor, we certainly can't change that. But I think it's important that we as pub, if indeed, we don't agree with that as a sort of foundational fact, or have a different interpretation of that, I do think it's important that we say that. And I think that can lead into perhaps emphasizing some of the trade-offs that we had in our November letter that we think is worth having higher rates for. So yeah, thanks for saying that, Robin.
Thank you, Karen. And I will just echo, that was one of the things I also took issue with, especially because I'm a wonk myself. And so there was a Portland survey insight that came from 2022 that actually said the cost of housing was the greatest impactor for people moving in and out of the city. And so while taxes impact that, it definitely felt like it was a framing that wasn't necessarily backed up by data. I also personally had an issue with all of the bureaus that we have to look after having complete restriction, and the mayor being okay with not putting any caps on some of our public safety services that are high cost of our general fund, but not necessarily offering us the community safety that they are charging us for. And so that was kind of where I was sitting with that. So thank you for at least agreeing on the first half of that, Karen. And I will let Alexis have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to second or third the need for us to do that kind of comparison between what our values were and in response to the mayor's guidance. And I'll say that that one around the assumption around like why people are leaving and so why rates cannot be increased jumped out to me as well. So I think it was a common one, and I'll need to relook at the mayor's guidance. But I'm just curious if there are other kind of built-in assumptions there that we may want to raise or flag for any concerns. And then I think my question here is if it's more effective, well, I guess that public work session is in 2 days, but would it be more effective for us to give verbal testimony if we can at that time, or to reiterate our values, perhaps drawing from our November letter at that time, rather than wait? I guess I don't want us to miss this opportunity to be impactful. And I feel like verbal testimony is more impactful than letters, which seem to kind of go into the ether and not really sure what happens to them. And I realize that is also in 2 days. So
I see some thumbs up of agreement with that. And so it sounds like at least a handful of us agree that there is a lot of power in spoken testimony. Off to Julia, go ahead.
Yeah, can people hear me okay? We're using a pair of earbuds that are kind of funky.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I agree with everything that's being said. And I feel like if I'm wondering if part of the argument, I think that with particularly the part about like we're being expected to, we're under different constraints than like other departments are under, and and our departments provide like really essential services that impact public health and provide essential resources that are like necessary for survival. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it's true. And I don't, asking such agencies to have these kinds of constraints and constrain them from being able to raise the money they might need to literally meet that very real standard and need is, I don't like fear mongering. I don't want to, but I just, to the degree that we can emphasize that not only is that like there's like it's like not fair that that's happening, it's like it feels like it's devaluing this literally essential service that these agencies are providing of like, you know, making sure that like human waste is processed appropriately and that people are getting clean drinking water. Like we can't, people move out of cities, you know, when they fail to do things like that well, right? So let's not make things worse. I'm not articulating this very well. I'm driving and multitasking. I'm hands-free, but like, anyway, I hope that made sense and that could be articulated in a better way in whatever we put in writing. And I agree about testifying. I have zero capacity for that right now, but I'm hoping that some folks do.
Chris Richard, go ahead.
I agree with what everyone was saying there, and I do think that we really need to point out that they need the budget that's being asked for because they're already cutting into the bone. You know, like Farshad just told us, we are not even really addressing our maintenance backlog. We're just kind of maintaining status quo, and that's going to bite us in the butt big time. We all know that. That's like, you know, your roof is leaking, which I know in BES we literally have roofs that are leaking, and we're not addressing it. And it sounds like water is now putting their toe in the same direction, which is going to bite us in the butt as well. So we really need the council to give them the budget they're asking for. And honestly, somehow they need more because we're not going to get out of this hole we're in with the current approach that we're doing. We're not fixing the problem. All we're doing is maintaining our current level, and that won't work. You know, if you know your house is burning down and you're not going to, you know, you put out the fire, but we didn't go back and fix the beams, this is where we're at, guys. And I really think that the mayor needs to really understand that that's where we're at this point. And I'm not just saying the mayor, but the whole council. They need to all understand that and try to address that, in my opinion. Thanks.
I see some thumbs up of agreement. I'm shaking my head in agreement. Let's go to Heather and then Joanne.
Hi, it's Heather, voting member. I just wanted to give support for everything that everyone has said so far. I don't have a lot of new things to contribute because I agree with all the points that everyone has brought up. I will say I also agree that in-person testimony is much more powerful. And I also, just as Julia said, I do not have any capacity to do that in person, but would be happy to try to help develop that testimony if need be. And then I also want to second what Alexis had brought up about this funding coming from PCEF. I am no expert on PCEF, but I do know quite a bit about it, and last year worked adjacent to some PCEF recipients. And so I know a little bit about it, and I definitely know that it wasn't established in its original form to fund deficits for our city bureaus. And while we've been in this meeting, I have been reading a couple of articles online about the fact that this money is being diverted to them. And while I understand that PCEF brought in more money than what was originally anticipated, I am really concerned about it because it is in its original inception, it was supposed to go to like NGOs and community groups that are led by communities of color. And so I just would love to hear more from the city about this, about why money is being put into the bureaus instead of to the community organizations that it was originally supposed to be for.
Thank you, Heather. I'm seeing thumbs up of agreement. I also agree. Let's go to Joanne for the final comment.
Oh, I get the last word. That's exciting. No, I wanted to build on what's already been said, especially by Chris, about are there specific things from the Water Bureau's budget and BES's budget that PUB feels like they should or can lift up and support? Just to add some extra oomph behind the presentations that the bureaus are doing, in addition to lifting up our values and things like that. I think that could be really impactful, especially as conversations go on and changes happen. Both bureaus talked about a lot of uncertainty. So I think if whatever we can do to help council prioritize and say, the things that and lend legitimacy and credibility to what the bureaus are saying, I think will help.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you all for the discussion. Luckily for everyone, I actually have the next 2 days off, so I would be available to volunteer to help write the testimony as well as speak on behalf of PUB. Definitely would appreciate any secondary support. And yeah, I see a lot of value in us being in person or speaking and not just sending letters. So with that,
Robin, if
someone
I
else
could just
Go ahead.
add something really briefly. This is Amy. I did want to let you know that I did touch base with the commissioner's staff, and Michelle had responded about whether PUB could be invited testimony because that request comes through the commissioner's office. And they actually were just discussing that themselves. I think one of the challenges that they're facing is that the PBOT Budget Advisory Committee actually meets at the same time as the work session. And so they were struggling with not having all of the advisory committees be represented if they were inviting one, but not able to invite the other because of the timing. So I'm not 100% sure, but I think generally Max's office has been supportive that if PUB is asking to be invited, that they will try to create that space. So I heard Robin volunteer. I just wanted to make sure that we took the time to see if there was any other volunteer to help with the crafting of the language. If you were able to provide that testimony as the chair on behalf of the PUB, you actually would have the authority to do that because you are the chair. So that's one of the few powers you have, is to be able to speak on behalf of the PUB if there's not enough time for something to have taken place before the meeting. So that's somewhat inherent, but of course, having other people's perspective, I will capture immediately the notes and what was shared tonight so that Robin and I can start with that as a working kind of to work off of. But if there's anything else that people want to send me either by email tonight or early mornings, please do that. Or if any of you are interested in volunteering and doing any sort of review in the next day, please let us know.
And I think it was, I think it was Heather that said that they were possibly available to assist in the writing. Okay, I'm seeing a head nod, beautiful. And so the last thing that we want to do while we have quorum is actually to approve the 2 previous meetings draft minutes. So if we've still got 6 of us, let's take a minute or two to review the previous minutes and see if we approve them.
Shall I move to approve?
I think generally,
Wonderful.
so we still have a full
I can't
quorum.
remember.
So we actually can just accept them as long as there's no changes. Of course, if you find something later, just let me know and we can always revisit them and update them at a future meeting. But since I'm not hearing any objections, we'll accept them as provided. And I see general agreement about that. Also just wanted to, in the closing minute, just wanted to make sure that we talked about the work session, which we just did. Wanted to flag for folks that we did receive 11 applications from the recruitment. So that was really good turnout. Jumped a lot from that initial one that was received. So that's great. The recruitment committee will have more applications to review. So I will be working on scheduling and getting all those out to folks this week so that they can convene and decide who to interview. Also, just a reminder that the Portland Harbor Grant Cycle is currently open. They're accepting applications through February 15th. So if you know anybody who might be interested in those funds, please refer to the email or let me know and I'll get information to you. And just wanted to flag that the meeting is next week, your next pub meeting. So I imagine we'll have continued conversation about budget as well as all the other topics that are moving quickly. But just wanted to flag that these are back-to-back weeks. So just be aware of that. Yes. Chris, perfect response, just a big wow. I think that is it.
All right, meeting adjourned.